This menu is dated April 11th, 1912, 3 days before the iceberg, which means every person who ordered off of it, the eggs, the smoked salmon, the marmalade, had no idea this would be one of the last ordinary mornings of their life. Today I'm cooking their breakfast, all of it. And I'm going to tell you about the one line on this menu that a steward almost certainly wrote wrong on purpose. Let's go back to Titanic. Everyone remembers the Titanic's dinners. The 11-course fantasies of soup and squab and champagne that get recreated every anniversary. Almost nobody talks about breakfast, and that's a mistake, because breakfast is actually where the class system aboard this ship becomes the most obvious. Dinner, you sat where you were told, at the hour you were told. Breakfast? Breakfast was a choice, and where and how you chose to eat it said everything about who you were. If you were a normal first-class passenger, you walked down to the dining saloon sometime between 8 and 10 a.m., picked a table in one of those cozy, recessed bays built for families, and ordered off a menu with, I'm not exaggerating, over 24 options. If you wanted something more exclusive, you went up to B deck, to the restaurant everyone on board nicknamed the Ritz, where the food wasn't included in your ticket. You paid extra for every plate. And reservations were required, because heaven forbid you sit near someone unplanned. And if you were the kind of person who owned one of the 2 parlor suites with a private promenade deck, the kind of suite the movie's Rose supposedly had, a steward simply brought your breakfast to you, kept hot under a silver dome, and you never had to see another human being before noon if you didn't want to. Today, I'm making the version most passengers would have actually eaten: baked apples, smoked salmon, shirred eggs, and buckwheat cakes, with 2 kinds of preserve. And since there's no surviving Titanic recipe book, the ship's actual recipes went down with it. I'm rebuilding this from the 2 sources. The White Star Line's kitchen almost certainly leaned on Auguste Escoffier's Le Guide Culinaire, the culinary Bible of the era, and the Fannie Farmer Cookbook, which in 1912 was selling in America the way a cookbook basically never sells today. Escoffier barely writes about breakfast. His book is a dinner book, through and through. But he does give us the baked apple, and it could not be simpler. Core it, but don't go all the way through. Leave the bottom intact so it holds together. Score a shallow ring around the middle of the skin so it doesn't split open like a water balloon in the oven. For the filling, Escoffier just says butter and sugar. Fannie Farmer, writing a few years later, adds a note I actually love. She says by springtime, apples go a little flat and flavorless, and a pinch of cinnamon fixes it. Titanic sailed in April. Spring apples, so cinnamon it is, into a 375-degree oven for about an hour, until they're soft but still holding their shape. While those bake, I want to show you 2 things on this exact menu that most people scroll right past. First, look at how marmalade is spelled. It isn't. It's marmalade. Now, normally I wouldn't make a big deal out of a 100-year-old typo. Except this exact mistake does not appear on the second-class breakfast menu from the same morning. Same ship, same day, same kitchen. Only first class got the misspelling. Maybe that's a coincidence. Or maybe some overworked steward, after another morning of fetching 17 different eggs preparations for 17 different demanding guests, let a little mistake slip through onto the menu of the one class actually capable of noticing it. I have 0 proof. I just think about it more than I should. Second thing, the date, April 11th. Most surviving Titanic menus are from April 14th, the night of the sinking, because those were literally in people's coat pockets when the Carpathia pulled bodies and survivors out of the water. But breakfast menus from the sinking almost never survive, because nobody keeps a breakfast menu. It was left behind in the stateroom. The reason we have this one, from 3 days earlier, is almost accidental. April 11th was the day Titanic made its last stop before the open Atlantic, Queenstown, Ireland, to drop off the final batch of outgoing mail. A handful of passengers, in a hurry to get one last letter home before weeks of silence, tucked their breakfast menu in with the envelope as a little souvenir. Those letters made it to shore. The ship didn't, 3 days later. It's honestly the closest thing we have to a photograph of an ordinary morning on that ship. A morning nobody on board yet knew was borrowed time. Escoffier does have one line about the smoked salmon. Slice it thin, roll each piece into a little cone. He calls it a cornet. And plate it with a sprig of parsley. That's the whole instruction. Sometimes the fanciest-looking dish on the table is also the laziest one to plate. And I respect that. What actually stops me on this menu isn't the salmon, though. It's the meat list. This was breakfast, and the options included grilled mutton kidneys, grilled ham, sausage, sirloin steak, mutton chops, and lamb collops, which is just a fancy word for pan-seared lamb slices and gravy. First class could, at 8 a.m., order what amounts to a full dinner. And somewhere in the middle of all that meat, sitting almost apologetically on the menu, is a box of Quaker Oats. Which is funny for one specific reason. An actual Quaker Oats executive, Walter Donald Douglas, was a first-class passenger on this crossing. I'd love to know if he ordered his own product just to see how it held up next to sirloin steak. History, annoyingly, does not record his choice. Now for the parts of this breakfast that don't have an Escoffier version at all, because, again, the man barely touches breakfast. For these, I went to Fannie Farmer, because her cookbook was the one actually flying off American shelves the same spring Titanic sailed. Her buckwheat cakes aren't leavened with baking powder like a modern pancake. They're leavened with yeast, left to rise overnight, so what you get the next morning already has a faint sourness to it before it ever touches the griddle. In the morning, stir in molasses, ladle it onto a hot griddle. Flip once. For the shirred eggs, Fannie's method is almost aggressively simple. Butter and breadcrumbs pressed into the bottom of a ramekin. She also suggests using a hollowed-out tomato instead, which is a nice touch if you want to impress absolutely no one at 8 a.m. Crack the eggs in on top, salt and pepper, another scatter of buttered crumbs, and into the oven until just barely set. All right. A first-class Titanic breakfast in front of me on an ordinary Tuesday. Okay, this might be the best thing I've made all year. It's an apple pie with the crust surgically removed. I would eat 6 of these and regret nothing. Cold, silky, barely needs the parsley. This is the one dish on this whole menu that would work exactly this well in a restaurant today. Creamy, good crunch from the crumbs on top. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not eating a full portion of this on camera for reasons that are entirely my own digestive business. But what I had was genuinely excellent. This tastes nothing like a modern pancake, much earthier, almost a little sour from the overnight yeast. It's not for everyone. If you already like buckwheat, you're going to love this. If you don't, no amount of syrup saves it. The blackcurrant conserve. I could eat this on toast 3 meals a day, no notes. The vintage Oxford marmalade starts sweet and finishes bitter, which is the exact wrong order for my taste buds. I want the bitterness up front and the sweetness as the reward, not the other way around. So, 100 and some years later, most of this breakfast still holds up. The baked apple genuinely, might be the easiest 5-star dish I've cooked on this channel. And there's something quietly strange about eating a menu that a real person picked out. On a real ordinary morning, 3 days before that ordinary stopped being guaranteed for any of them. If you want me to go back into other Titanic menus, luncheon, second class, the cruise meals, which were a completely different story, tell me down in the comments and I'll build the next one. Until then, I'll see you at the next table.